Hello, welcome to the Publisher Podcast from Media Voices. I'm Peter Houston, and this season Esther Thorpe, Chris Sutcliffe and I are exploring the people and products powering publishing, both through this podcast and in our weekly newsletter. I bet you can't guess what it's called. That's right, the Publisher Newsletter, which you can sign up for at voices.media. Before we start, I'm delighted to welcome BlueConic on board as sponsors for this season of the Publisher Podcast and the Publisher Newsletter. BlueConic is a customer data operating system that makes your data work harder so that you don't have to. Whether it's capturing valuable audience insights or activating them with precision, the possibilities are endless with BlueConic's all-in-one platform. Learn more at BlueConic.com, where data is for doing. This week I'm interviewing Paul Ostwald, co-founder of the German language daily newsletter Morningcrunch, which is sent to more than 50,000 young professionals in Germany every morning. Morningcrunch is ad funded, and Paul explains how he's working with a German media house to bring in bigger deals. He also talks about how he's taken inspiration from newsletter outfits that have way bigger A/B testing budgets. I started by asking Paul, what is Morningcrunch?
It's a very good question. It keeps shifting a bit. I mean, the core of it is a media brand that's directed at young professionals in Germany. And we serve them with daily briefings, so daily newsletters that go out at 6 a.m., 5 days a week. That's the core of it.
So it's a newsletter. I mean, are those newsletters anywhere else? Can they find them on a website or...
You can. I think if you dig deep, you would find them on an archive, but they're not really geared towards online readers. They're not on podcasts. They're not on Telegram, at least from what I know. And so we really try and focus the whole brand on newsletter first and newsletter only currently.
Yeah, that was actually my point. Is this is a newsletter brand. It's not an aggregated brand. It's not anything like that. It's first and foremost a newsletter brand. So my big question for you, you've already mentioned younger audiences. Are younger audiences, do they care about email?
Interestingly enough, they do actually care about newsletters, which we didn't know when we set out. I mean, we now have 50,000 subscribers. They open at a 55% open rate, which for us is pretty good. And I think what the reason for that is, most people have switched off notifications from basically everything except email and WhatsApp, maybe. Depends on the country, I think. But in Germany, at least, those are the two. And there's not a lot of competition for young audiences on the email side of things. I think that's worked out pretty well for us, to be honest.
You actually did a survey about that, about WhatsApp usage?
Yeah. We try to find out whether WhatsApp would be the next channel to go into, because we thought it's the most intuitive, most native sort of format, especially for young audiences. And actually found that most people don't want it there because it's already cluttered and they prefer not to have another unread WhatsApp chat there. So we've stayed with email for now, yeah.
When you say younger audiences, what sort of age group are you talking about?
I mean, we started off with a slightly younger audience, so somewhere around 18 to 22, 23. But we're now seeing it sort of hit an average of 31. So we're probably looking at 25 to 35. And then above that, everyone who feels young and is interested in having a daily newsletter as well.
And these are people who are in a job,
yeah.
So maybe their first job or second job. Are they particularly working in any industry sectors?
We did a survey on that, and it showed a lot of, as you said, people who were in their first or second job. Many of them were working in startups, quite a few in finance industry, but also, to be honest, a really, really broad group who are in manufacturing jobs, who are building their own companies that are not tech companies, but sort of hardware companies as well. We've had a few. So it's actually quite a broad audience. I think that's also because we try and be as clear and try and use as little jargon as possible. And I think that kind of resonates with a broader audience as well.
So I know, go back to the actual email itself and the format of those emails. I know you've taken some inspiration from elsewhere.
Yeah.
How are those emails formatted? What do they look like?
Absolutely. We've taken inspiration from those who have big budgets to A/B test and find out what works. And we've taken inspiration from Axios, from Morning Brew, from quite a few newsletters actually that my co-founder and I, read ourselves. So I think that was the starting point. What we now have is an introduction that is something we write every night that's a bit humorous, or at least we think it is. And then we head into stocks data, which are nothing, extraordinary, but it's always nice to have them there, have an overview of what's going on. And then we have two top stories, as we call them. So stories that we tell in our language, so in bullet points. And then we have a link list of curated links where we think those are things that are really worth reading today, where we lead out to, I don't know, the Financial Times, to The Guardian, to the big players when we see articles that we think everyone should have a go at.
So there's a curation aspect to it as much as anything else. Do you think the language aspect to that is important? The fact that you're going to The Guardian, finding a story, but then you're talking about that in German, all in German, is it?
Yeah, it's all in German. We lead out to sources that are not German, so the international ones, because they often have coverage that's just a bit better, we think. But I think the German aspect is really interesting because there's no German media brand really trying to approach that audience in a language that they speak themselves. So with all the abbreviations, we're not 100% German in that sense as well. We have a lot of English words that we slip in. We have sections like by the numbers, and then we'll continue in German, because that's how, if you go onto German streets and talk to people, that's how people speak. And we're trying to emulate that rather than sort of making it a German language product just for the sake of it. And I think that's working quite well, because there is just, as I said, I don't think there's any German media brand that tries to do what we do. I think there are quite a few in the English-speaking industry. So I think that gives us a bit of an edge.
So go back to those English language newsletters that you've taken inspiration from, the ones with the big A/B testing budgets. What have you learned from those guys?
Brevity. I think keeping things short. So if you look at Axios, the bullet format, that's really something people enjoy. And we personally enjoy, I think, with the first user group that we look at. It also is about, I think, the use of emojis and memes and all these things, that there are quite a few newsletters that have very solid storytelling and very solid journalists writing them, but they still slip in an emoji here and a meme there. And I think finding the right balance there without becoming sort of the bantery format that, no one really takes seriously. I think that's something we've taken from the newsletters, how to find that balance as well. And then, the link lists and curated jobs, something we also do. I think that's something we've also taken from US examples, because it's something that I personally used as well when I was reading a lot of newsletters.
I think that's interesting that you've sort of put yourself at the center of that user journey, that this is what I like, so yeah, I'm going to try and find out if there's other people that like that.
It sometimes goes awfully wrong. Sometimes you put in stuff that no one cares about. And we've had some internal discussions as well about certain features where we thought this was really neat and really cool, and we just had no resonance on it. For example, one thing, just we had a jobs section, which we still have, but we used to describe the jobs in a kind of humorous way, and people thought it was funny, but no one applied to the jobs, so we stopped that.
You're not afraid to, I hate the word pivot, but you're not afraid to move to doing things in a different way. I'm guessing you're always looking at the numbers. So you're always looking at your open rates, you're always looking at click-through rates, you're always looking at engagement.
Exactly. I think we try a lot, and that's the beauty of not having sort of any big media corporation in the background. We can just try out stuff, and if it goes wrong, then we stop it again, and if it works out, people appreciate it. And also the user group is super helpful. So the readers, they interact with us. So we usually do polls. What kind of format do you like? What did you not enjoy? And we get very blunt but very helpful feedback all the time. And people are willing to forgive us because they, if we make mistakes, because they know we're small company and they're growing with us. So I think it's more, again, you don't like the word pivot. I don't like the word journey, but in a way it is a bit of a journey with users who start reading and then, grow with us as we grow along. And I think that's part of why we can just try out stuff and people don't immediately unsubscribe.
So you've got 50,000 subscribers at the moment, yeah? Over what period? How long have you been going?
We started in March 2023, but back then it was more of a rough concept. I think the first real growth was in August 2023. So it's been roughly a year now.
But was there a specific tactic that you used to grow the audience?
Interestingly, we tried a lot of things. Again, some of them didn't work at all. The ones that worked best were, first of all, a referral program. So readers could get, for example, a Patagonia vest if they referred 50 subscribers to us, which sort of is a bit of a play on the finance industry in London, or in the Patagonia vests. But so that worked really well with a lot of different categories, 10 referrals, 20 referrals, 100 referrals. That helped. The best growth strategy was, on the one hand, working with influencers who have substantial reach, but usually don't have newsletters of their own. And for them, it was quite nice to just showcase the newsletter in their stories, in their posts. And we had a deal with them, a commission-based deal that they know they're sending people to something that's a high-value product. And we know we're getting people who are interested in following those influencers who are usually finance affiliated. So that worked really well. And the other thing was smaller social media platforms. So thinking of Quora, Reddit, those guys, rather than Meta and Google and the big guys.
Is that you just being active in those platforms like Quora, answering questions or posting questions? And
yeah, on the one hand, yes, so the organic side, but then we also just paid for ads that were placed in the feeds. And the nice thing is that you can kind of target them quite well, because people who ask questions on Quora on finance topics are probably also interested to get a daily newsletter on finance and business in general. So that's helped a lot, but it took some time to find the right wordings, the right formats for those social media platforms.
so your revenue model at the moment, as I understand it, is the newsletter is completely free. So your revenue is coming from sponsors.
That's right. So it's 100% ad monetization currently.
Did you did you have sponsors before you started, or did you start and then think, oh, we better find some sponsors?
We honestly, it was the second. So we started off and we always thought, if we manage to get a good audience and a sizable one, there will be people who will want to advertise there. And that definitely worked out. So initially we just started approaching brands. Now we have a few that we work with regularly, but also some that approach us. And the second is that we have a sales house. So Germany's, I would say, leading sales house for business dailies, IQ Digital. They sell our newsletter and bundle together with Handelsblatt, Manager Magazine, like all these German business titles. And that's working quite well as well.
Oh, that's interesting. So rather than just someone coming along and saying, I'll sponsor what you guys are doing, it's actually bundled with adjacent products from some of the bigger German publishers.
Right. So because the size in the beginning was not big enough. So, I mean, if we talk about 20,000 subscribers, that wasn't enough for very big brands to put in ads, because we then end up discussing sums of, I don't know, 5,000, 10,000 euros, which for us was great in the beginning. But obviously for the very big brands, it's not worth having a lot of conversations about. And so what the advertising partner, so the sales house, does for us is basically sell our ad space together with the ad space in the other big finance publications. And that's then in bundle big enough for the large clients to actually say, let's book for a month in all of those finance newsletters. And for us, it's great because obviously they get a commission for that. So the sales house in the middle, but that's totally fine because they're bringing in the clients. And we just have a safe, steady stream of revenue there. But then we obviously go out and try and sell on top ads and placements.
And when you're selling directly, how do you work with the media house in that sense? How do you not step on each other's toes?
It's a very good question. We have a very close working relationship with them, and we approach brands that are not usually represented by agencies as much as they do. So we have the startups that we approach directly, the brands that are entering the German market and don't yet have an established presence. And they are more on the agency side, so speaking to the bigger agencies that represent the brands. So we don't really step on each other's toes there, but then we also just speak as well on individual clients and make sure we don't approach them at the same time.
Are the sponsors purely finance brands, or you got lifestyle brands?
I would say it's a good mix. So we also have, I don't know if I can name brands in the podcast, but maybe I can.
From my point of view, yeah.
We have Readly, for example, Readly that offer the subscription for magazines. They advertise with us because they would love to also reach more young readers. Then we have Fiverr, that's the freelancer platform. So it varies a lot, I would say. It always depends on whether the offering fits. So we've also been approached by a few finance companies that we've sort of not ended up working with. There are a lot of startups that come up, and we need to make sure that we don't put something in front of our readers that isn't quite as solid as it seems.
Yeah, and I guess your readers are, I mean, they're discerning in the sense that you're not going to be having crypto adverts in there or anything like that. You're not going to have some of those crazy ads going on.
No, we try and steer clear of any sort of anything that could be perceived as trashy. It's just not worth it for the brand. And usually those are also deals that wouldn't pay well as well. So.
Do you have any sense that, so we talk so much about trust in the media, and the bigger titles, that have been there for decades and decades, in some cases hundreds of years, they're trusted. You're a startup.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that, have you got to work really hard to be trusted as a newcomer?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. And I think what's so interesting about the trust is, I spent some months working also for the Reuters Institute in Oxford and was actually working on some trust studies there. What's so interesting is the declining trust for some of the big media brands, but a few select ones that have managed to sustain the high levels of trust that they've always held. We have very strong public broadcasters in Germany that have high trust levels. We have a few select titles that are doing really well. But at the same time, I think there are not a lot of brands that are very trusted in the younger readership among younger readers. And building up that trust takes time, and I think we're nowhere close to done with that. We've been going for a year now, and I think part of building trust is transparency. So we're very transparent about when we make mistakes, transparent about who we are, the people behind the newsletter, all these things. So I think that's helping us. But building that trust, is definitely it's the hardest part, I would say.
So, is there something that you pay particular attention to, or is it just the whole thing?
It's so hard to say. One thing we do a lot is, again, to have these feedback sessions with the readers, with the audiences, and be transparent about outcomes. So when we ask, did you guys enjoy reading, I don't know, our top stories in the last 3 months, and we get a mediocre result, we'll definitely also flag that in the newsletter and say we'll try better. And I think there's so much to it, but it goes down so much into granular things as well, making sure you don't have spelling mistakes, making sure you cite the sources where they should be. All these kind of things add up to a feeling of trust and mistrust, I think. There's probably a scientific definition that mine wasn't, but that's, I think it's a really complex topic.
I now have to go and find out the scientific definition of trust actions. So I first met you when you were working with Forum.eu, and that was invested, right? You got, was it VC investment or was it angel investment? I can't remember. You don't have any investment at the moment for Morningcrunch, do you?
We do, actually. So we have an investment from a Berlin-based fund and then 2 media angels as well.
Okay.
So add it again, yeah.
But you've taken a different approach this time, right?
Yes.
The last time was pretty much purely funded by investment.
Yes.
So is it fair to say you're being more cautious with investment?
I would say yes. We definitely took a longer time building up the brand before we went out to speak to investors. And I think that's been extremely helpful because there's more to show for it, which means you get better terms, but also people are more interested. They potentially already read the newsletter a couple of times before they become an investor or an angel. And I think the last time we were also going for a more, I would say, in the end, I mean, Forum is now a non-profit, so more, a broader scope of the project. And I think that's harder to find people for who want to finance it. Whereas what we've done now is much clearer in the company setup with the idea of having newsletters at the core and ad revenue stream. So it's pretty clear what we do, and I think that helped in combination with a bit of track record to make the discussions even more comfortable than they were with the last project.
I mean, I'm interested now that you're saying that your advertising or sponsorship sales is being bundled with some of the bigger publishers. Mm-hmm. Are those guys interested? Would they invest?
We speak to them, yes. We've had conversations with, I think, majority of the German media houses, so the big companies. I think it's the wrong time, to be honest, because we are, as you said initially, right, we are trying out so much stuff and we're still finding our path. And having a big company in the background that is expecting and should be expecting a very clear roadmap and where you'll be in 3 months and 5 months and 10 months, I don't think we can deliver that right now. And so we've had the discussions, they were very good, and we work with some of them now on some side topics and specific projects, but we have not taken in any investment from them.
So basically giving yourself the freedom to change and do different things, and then go back to them once you rule the world.
Well, yeah, maybe some point before that, but yes.
Ask them for more money. I mean, one of the things that I'm really interested in about what you're doing is the local language aspect of it. Mm-hmm. You read Axios, I read Axios, you read Morning Brew, I read Morning Brew. What I don't read is Morningcrunch because it's not in a language that I speak. And I think I'm interested in the differentiation aspect of that, but I'm also interested in the kind of duality, I feel like, the fact that you will read Axios, but also this German language newsletter.
I think we have quite a few readers who read both, or maybe not Axios, but who read, I don't know, the FT Daily Briefing or a Guardian newsletter. I think the beauty of having something in your own language is that there are references. It's not just language, it's the whole context of language, right? It's the references, it's the humor, it's all these things that make it just feels like you're at home more in that language. So, for example, there are loads of newsletters where we've plugged YouTube videos to German ads, TV ads from the early 2000s or 2010s, where we know people have grown up with these ads and know them. And we use them as a reference, as a joke here and there. And these are all things that create a whole environment of references, and I think that's the power of writing in German, that you can do that, and people immediately feel like they speak to a friend or they're reading a message from a friend rather than this sort of more official English language text that they might find very informative but is less close to their heart, I'd say.
I think what's interesting for me, so in English we have the idea that people will subscribe to the New York Times and then they will subscribe to a local or regional news source. And the parallel there with local language newsletters, I think, is really interesting. So it might be one of these, FT is a great example. So it's in English, but it's fairly specialist.
Yeah.
But then there's also this German language specialist newsletter. And the idea of people having this little bundle of newsletters that they refer to keep them up to date, whether it's for the job or whether it's just because of what they're interested in. We get so caught up in English language publications, right? Because mainly because we don't speak any other languages for most of the time.
Well, and because you have amazing sources, that's the other side of the coin, right? There's so much good stuff out there in English, and so much super specialized and niche content that's already being done. And I'm always amazed. For example, I was in the US traveling a few months ago, and you have all these Axios newsletters on, I don't know, from Salt Lake City, from Denver, and even smaller cities. And then if you actually dig down, you will always find newsletters from those cities as well. And the same in the UK, actually. You have so many niche authors that are really just writing for the fun of it. And I think in Germany, you just have less of that. Obviously, because it's just much less people. And so I think there's more space for it. And people are also longing for it a bit more because it feels new, right? To have something in German that feels like a special interest while also, trying to deliver on the highest standards of journalism. I think that's just, it's novel.
But also there's a different aspect to it, is that if the FT was just to decide, okay, we're going to publish a German language newsletter, it's different from what you're doing. Could be great content, whatever, but it's not got that local cultural context, right?
I think they tried as well. Financial Times Germany was a thing for a while, and I think it catered to some audience, as you say, but the power of not just translating, and I mean, they did more than translating back then, but I think the power of what we do and again, trying to enrich those texts with references, with shout outs to what's happening in German talk shows, what's happening in German politics, or even on TikTok and German TikTok. All these references are unique, I think. And they give this whole cultural picture of what's going on. And I think that's just fun to read because you feel like, oh, I know that one. Oh, I've seen this. Oh, I thought this was funny. I didn't know what it was about. And, now you guys are here explaining it to me or using it in a different context, and it feels really funny. And I think that's the power of writing in German for a German audience. But obviously it comes with limitations in terms of audience size as well.
Sure.
And with advertisers.
Is your audience purely in Germany, or are you also going to Austria, Switzerland?
Austria and Switzerland as well. We have quite a substantial readership in Switzerland because my former employer was in Switzerland, and I have a few networks there, and those were the initial readers that then referred others. So we have a few readers in Switzerland, but that's really the three countries that we can target. And beyond that, as you say, there's no way for us to just, I don't know, use AI translation and put it all into Spanish or French, because 90% of references will be a disaster. And so again, we would, have to build everything from scratch in a new language. So that's why obviously English has an advantage because it works everywhere.
Yeah. In terms of the future, is your focus now on building audience, or are you thinking of maybe other verticals that you could look at?
I think the focus is now audience. Growing it to 150,000 is roughly where we want to be by next year, end of next year. And then we can start looking at different verticals. I'm a bit hesitant, to be honest, with other verticals, because it always, as you know very well from the podcast, right? It's a whole new thing that you need to start. You need to have specialists on board. You need to build it up. It takes time. We're currently at 3 newsletters. We're also going to expand the portfolio to at least 6, maybe 10 by the end of next year. New verticals. So looking at automotive, looking at consulting, and all these industries that don't have a specific digital first product, trying to reach readers there with the same tonality, a bit more humorous, a bit lighthearted, but at the same time very informative. So that's the next steps, I would say.
Would they be on a different frequency? Because you're daily at the moment, is that right?
Yes, we're daily. I think they would also be daily.
Wow.
Which will be interesting to see from an editorial perspective. But I think, and my co-founder Gregor agrees, and actually he's always said daily newsletter is the only way to build up a habit and a trust with an audience. If you're trying to also monetize it, I think through ads, that makes sense, because if you only send once a week, you'd need a lot of readers to make it worthwhile on the ad side. So I think daily is the only way. We'll have to see whether, if you look at consulting, for example, I'm sure there is a lot happening. We'll have to see which formats will work best to make it interesting every day, because you don't want to just talk about, I don't know, McKinsey doing XYZ. You will have to tell a bit more every day. So that just means new format and trying out and seeing what works and what doesn't.
Do you have a timescale for introducing a new vertical?
Probably end of this year, latest early next year.
And you would introduce one new one, see how it goes,
probably
then another.
We might start 2 new ones simultaneously, but we'll try and build those up a bit before we start the next ones then.
I guess if you've already got a base, then people would be interested, so moving from the general finance business newsletter to a specific consulting newsletter. So you're not starting from nowhere.
Exactly.
Thanks so much to Paul for taking the time to speak with me. And just a quick update, since we spoke, which was less than 3 weeks ago, they have opened waiting lists for Markets Crunch, Deals Crunch and AI Crunch. Don't forget, we'll have a write-up of the key learnings from this interview on voices.media, or dropping into your inbox on a Tuesday if you've signed up for the publisher newsletter, which you can do on voices.media. This season's sponsored by BlueConic, the operating system that puts data into action for marketing and growth doers. The industry-first solution empowers doers with an unmatched range of capabilities to access relevant customer data, create resonant customer experiences, and drive maximum returns for their business. Learn more at BlueConic.com, where data is for doing.